In the year 2024, Philadelphia has become a desolate wasteland of abandoned buildings and fires burning in the streets. There are no survivors to be found. However, in 1988, a mysterious hooded figure roams the city. As the night wears on, a pianist, a cook, and a bus driver suddenly begin to bleed from every orifice before all dying at once. The bus crashes, and a book titled American Patriot falls out, revealing that the driver had been reading it. Soon after, police officer Thomas begins his shift, but not before cooking breakfast for his pregnant wife, Jean. When he arrives at the bus crash, he meets with his partner, Maddox, and his brother-in-law, head detective Holt, who is already on the scene. The bodies of the pianist, the cook, and the bus driver all have 3 strange puncture wounds on their necks, and chunks of their brains are scattered on the ground. The police force is puzzled by these strange wounds and the unknown substance used to inject them. As the investigation continues, Thomas and Maddox receive a call about a live victim with the same wound. They rush to the scene and learn that the attacker is a black woman wearing a blue hoodie with a bloody hand. The victim dies before revealing any more information. The police begin interrogating every black woman in the area and eventually create an identikit of the suspect. Thomas and Maddox find her by chance and pursue her into the subway station, where they encounter her futuristic weapon, which resembles the device used in the injection. The woman, Rhea, easily fights off Maddox, breaks his leg. Thomas manages to free himself and tracks Rhea down, but she speaks mysterious words and congratulates him on his new daughter. She also apologizes for Maddox's injury, claiming that she didn't mean to harm him. When Thomas tries to arrest her, Rhea fights him off and handcuffs him to a bench. Thomas strikes Rhea with her own weapon, causing her to fall onto the subway tracks and die when the train passes by. The case seems to be closed, but Thomas learns that Rhea had no identification and the only item found on her were a set of strange keys. An officer informs Thomas that his wife is having trouble giving birth and is hemorrhaging. Thomas rushes to her side, placing the bracelet on her wrist, but despite his presence, it isn't enough. Moments later, the doctors arrive with news: the baby is safe, but Jean sadly passed away. 9 years later, in 1997, Thomas, now a detective, takes the day off to celebrate his daughter Amy's birthday. Amy wears her mother's bracelet, and every year, Thomas gifts her a new charm. They visit Jean's grave, only to find someone had already left flowers. Before they can go to the zoo, Thomas receives an emergency call and leaves Amy with another cop while he investigates. Maddox, who now walks with a limp, is there and denies leaving flowers for Jean. The police find another body with the same wounds, and since it's the anniversary, Thomas suspects it's not a coincidence. This time, a politics professor is the victim, and the strange poison is used again. Holt, now a lieutenant, joins the investigation, and they find a person wearing a hoodie similar to Rhea's in the security footage. The officers blame it on a copycat, but Thomas isn't convinced and decides to reopen the case. The test results show that the keys belong to an aircraft manufactured in 1996, but they were found in 1988. Thomas leaves Amy with an officer to investigate the only airfield in the area with that plane. On the way, he bumps into Dr. Rao, who points out the murders align with his studies on a lunar perigee, which is thought to open a bridge into time travel. Thomas and Maddox dismiss his theory. At the airfield, they find it closed but see a light on in a building. Thomas sneaks in and suspects the clerk is being held hostage. Rhea, alive and not having aged a day, appears and orders the clerk to tie Thomas up. Thomas calls Maddox before being tied up to a chair. Rhea asks the clerk for the plane keys. When the clerk goes to get them, Rhea takes out her weapon to defend herself. However, she is surprised by Maddox, who sneaks up behind her. In a moment of panic, Rhea accidentally shoots Maddox, killing him instantly. Rhea apologizes to Thomas for the incident, and they quickly leave the airfield as a backup party led by Holt arrives. Thomas passes out on the plane and dreams about Jean before Rhea wakes him up. Rhea explains to Thomas that she is a time traveler from the future who returns every 9 years when the moon sets. She's on a mission to save lives and cannot divulge more information. Thomas refuses to leave and Rhea pushes him out of the plane into the water. The next morning, Thomas finds the crashed plane, but Rhea is nowhere to be found. Holt scolds Thomas for his recklessness, but Thomas insists that Rhea is a time traveler. 9 years later, Thomas is now a private investigator obsessed with Rhea's mystery. He investigates the death of Harold Nowak and connects the dots to Rhea's victims. Thomas picks Amy up from school and gives her a birthday present. Amy tells him about her life, including her boyfriend. Thomas then visits Jean's grave and meets with Holt to discuss his findings. Holt dismisses Thomas's theory about time travel, and Thomas pretends to have mental health issues to steal Holt's badge and access the police system for Heather's information. When Thomas finally arrives at Heather's place, it's too late. She's already dead with the same bleeding and 3-puncture wound. Suddenly, Rhea jumps out of the house, and Thomas tries to shoot her, but he only manages to wound her hand with one of his bullets that he later finds on Heather's dead body. Rhea escapes on a bike, so Thomas steals a truck and follows her to the same beach where she crashed the plane. Thomas enters a sewer pipe and discovers the place where Rhea hides her time machine, but before he can do anything, she activates it and gets away. When he leaves the sewer, Holt and his men are waiting to arrest him, not believing his wild story about a time traveler. From afar, Rao watches the scene unfold. 9 years later, in 2015, Rao has finally finished working on the poison that Rhea used, which he tested on pigs. Thomas had been correct that it's remotely activated from a computer, explaining why all the victims die at the same time. Rao's lab is near the same shore with the sewer pipe, and his security cameras show that today. Thomas is making camp at the beach because he knows it's the anniversary and Rhea should be coming. While waiting, Amy calls Thomas, telling him that even though they barely see each other nowadays, she wants him to be there when she has her baby. Suddenly, Thomas is knocked out, and when he wakes up, he's in Rao's van with all the dead pigs. Rao explains that it's thanks to Thomas's investigation that he understood Rhea is saving the world, and she's the culmination of his research. He plans to keep Thomas locked up for a few days so that Rhea can finish her mission, then he promises to let him go. However, Thomas doesn't accept this plan and tries to make Rao stop the van by jumping on him. The vehicle crashes, and Thomas manages to escape. A few moments later at the beach, Rhea shows up after time traveling for the first time, and Thomas is waiting for her. He intends to kill her to prevent her from traveling back and causing the murders, which have turned him into an obsessed shell of a person. But Rhea reveals that Thomas is her grandfather. Amy married a black man, and Rhea is their daughter. She takes off her bracelet, revealing her identity, and asks Thomas to stop trying to kill her in the past. However, she can't change what's already happened because time travel is a one-way trip. Rhea asks Thomas to go home and spend time with Amy while she finishes her mission. It all started when Rhea was 9 and a man detonated a van with explosives, killing 11,000 people. This triggered a series of events that ended in a civil war, killing millions and leaving the country in ruins. That's why Rhea volunteered to go back and shoot all the members of the militia group with the doctor's special poison, which is activated by an old Rao in the future, resetting the whole timeline. In the present, Thomas makes it to the hospital just in time, and Holt is glad to see he's finally chosen family over work. Thomas gets to hold the newborn Rhea for the first time, and he puts the bracelet around her tiny wrist.